Hello and welcome to Law Talk. I'm your host, Mitch Panter with the law firm of Panter Panter Sampedro. We're here today to talk with Johanna Sheehe, and we're going to talk a little bit about some really interesting things. We're going to talk a little bit about commercial litigation, some insurance defense, and equine law, all about horses. We're going to learn about that. First, let me give you a little history. Law Talk came about because about 25, 30 years ago, my partner and brother Brett Panter and I decided that we wanted to help educate the community. So what we did was we formed a TV show back then on public broadcasting channel. And what we would do is we bring in different lawyers and judges and community people, politicians, and talk about the law and how it affected you, members of our community. Panter Panter Sampedro's law firm dedicated to protecting Florida's families. And so one of the big things that we do is try to help the community. There, fast forward a few years, and we formed what's called the Panter Panter Sampedro Network. And what we did is we got together some of the best and finest lawyers in our community, and we formed a network. The purpose of the network is to help people. You never want to be able to say, don't do that. You want to be able to say, I help people. Let me find a lawyer that does that. And so we joined together with about 150 lawyers in Miami-Dade County and 50 lawyers in Broward County, and every type of law imaginable we're able to help people on. So as part of that and that whole process, we started with this show. And the purpose of this show, again, is to meet different people that do different things and to talk with them and to find out a little bit about them and hopefully to educate you and give you some areas of law. So we welcome you, Johanna. Thank you very much for being here today. Who are you and what do you do?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Johanna Sheehe, and I am an attorney at Sheehe and Associates. We practice commercial litigation. We do have an insurance defense practice, and I also have a somewhat unique specialty, equine law. Anything having to do with horses, I'm your gal.
So let's talk about how the heck you got involved in horses. So tell us a little bit about who you are. Where'd you come from? How'd you get to be here today?
Absolutely. So born and raised in Miami, Florida, actually just down the road from your offices growing up. The Panter Panter Sampedro office was kind of iconic, drove by it all the time.
We've been around a while.
Exactly. I grew up down here, and even though I'm a city gal, I grew up riding horses out in horse country. And my family's been involved with horses all my life. My sister actually lives in Ocala on a farm. She raises horses. Awesome. She breeds horses. So it's really kind of in our blood. And, I went off to law school.
Where'd you go to law school?
I went to Northwestern University in Chicago. Cool. Definitely the winters down here are better. Not going to lie. Especially now. Although I have to say, these last few teasers of fall have been wonderful. And now we're back to hot Miami weather.
It beats Chicago.
It does.
Anything beats Chicago.
It does. But I graduated Northwestern. I clerked in Chicago. And then I went off to Los Angeles and I was practicing out there at a big law firm. Eventually, my father's an attorney. We joke he's the big S in Sheehe and Associates. And kind of the opportunity came around where I was thinking about my practice and I realized what better person to learn from than my father. And I didn't want to ever look back and have passed up the opportunity to practice with him. So I came back to Miami, started practicing here. I've been here for about 6 or 7 years now, loving every minute of it. Well, most minutes of it. I'll be honest about that.
Of course.
It was we'd always kind of had this informal equine practice just because we know so many people within the equine industry, and when they have problems, they would come to us. And one of the things that I think is unique about our background is that we can speak the language. We can talk the talk. Sure. And when you're speaking about very specialized areas, it's really at a high level of generality. I mean, the law is the law. If you're looking at an injury, you're looking at a breach of contract, you're looking at an insurance claim. There are certain things that there's going to be that line that pulls through all areas of that. So whether it's equine or not, but there are very particular aspects of equine law, and the people that come to us, they want to be able to know that we understand what they're going through, that we understand.
Sure. So who would come to you and under what circumstances would they come to you? I know we do personal injury, and we've had cases where people were injured out at the horse ranch, whether the child got stepped on or riding the horse, they fell off or something like that. And that's negligence law. I'm assuming that there are contractual issues, buying horses, selling horses. Who would come to you and under what circumstances?
So our clients tend to be horse owners and farm owners. And generally, we see them when they have a problem or when they're trying to mitigate a problem. So prevent one. Exactly. So a lot of one aspect of things that I do is I do a lot of contract drafting for sales, for leases and things like that. Also general liability contracts. In Florida is actually unique among some other states because there are statutes that particularly apply to equine sales. They have equine liability statutes, which from the perspective of the horse owner or the farm owner, those are great because they protect you.
Sure.
But you have to know what those statutes are, and there are requirements. So you have to make sure that you're complying with them. Because
give us an example.
So, for example, in certain horse contracts, there's those magic words. There are certain disclosures that you have to have in terms of representations that are being made, warranties that are applied, so on and so forth. If you fail to comply with the statute, that can lead to the presumption that there is an unfair deceptive trade practice. And now you're opening yourself up to liability under that statute, which has all sorts of statutory fees and penalties, right, including the possibility of attorney's fees.
Right.
So, there are certain things, they're very simple, but you want to make sure you're complying.
Must be like the example I can think of is a car or house, for that matter. You buy it as is,
exactly,
or you buy it subject to issues that exist. And if you hide those issues, mm-hmm, the horse has got problems and you don't tell them about it, it's a problem, as compared to as is, you take the horse as you find it.
Exactly. And a lot of, and that's typically what you're going to see in these contracts is very explicitly as is. I actually have a case right now where I'm dealing with a dispute that's arisen after a sale of multiple horses. And what you see a lot of times in the equine industry is, the equine industry goes back hundreds of years.
And in Florida?
In Florida, absolutely. Okay. Buying and selling horses. Before we had, cars, right? Before there's Metro Rail, there was horse and carriages. And, wow, horses used to be really, a huge asset to individuals. It was part of their daily lives just for basic transportation needs. Of course, now it's much more of a pleasure and a sport, and their purpose has changed. But handshake agreements have always been something that's been very endemic with the horse industry.
Those people,
absolutely, and there's still so many deals that get done by handshake agreements, and 9 times out of 10, nothing happens, and it's totally fine. But
that 10th time,
you might have a problem. And a lot of times what I've seen in my practice is that there will be just form contracts that horse owners will use. A lot of times they're fine, but a lot of times there's also kind of these ancillary oral agreements. There's all this talk. There's side deals done by the handshake. And so, for example, in this case that I have now, there was sale of multiple horses. I think it's up to 7 over a period of time. And the relationship has soured. And now there's allegations that there were misrepresentations. There's allegations of, failures to comply with the statute, that there are unfair and deceptive trade practices going on here, all these misrepresentations. And so, we have these documents, but we also know, and the evidence showing that this really isn't representative of what the parties agreed to.
Okay.
And so, it's I wouldn't say it's problematic. It's litigation, right? This is what we do.
So you involve sometimes in actual litigation where you would go to court under a breach of contract because they different circumstances. Sure. So which side do you represent? Are there or both, or how do you do that?
It depends. Okay. It can be the plaintiff or the defendant.
Plaintiff being the person suing, defendant being the person
correct.
Sued.
I typically represent a horse owner or a farm owner, depending on what that capacity is. Okay. For example, I was involved in a case a year or so ago where I represented a farm. I represented a farm owner. My client had been a co-owner with another individual. That relationship soured. The business, they basically sold the property, went their separate ways. But then there came to be some disputes about the division of assets, the ownership of certain horses, where were they supposed to go, who was responsible for the board, and all these different issues that kind of arose out of that initial transaction. Again, we had some documentation, some handshake agreements, and there were, there was consequences to that. Okay. But no, that was we litigated that. Just like any other
contract.
You're going to, you end up
a horse, a car, a house.
Exactly.
It's
end up
same.
in court. You can end up in mediation. You might end up in front of the judge.
So let me put it into my world.
Sure.
So I'm in the personal injury world, and we have people that are injured. Let's bring it to the simplest of cases. I bring my child out to horse country on Sunday. Kid falls off the horse. Kid gets hurt. What do I do?
Well,
after you call Panter Panter and Sampedro.
Obviously, that's the first thing that you should do. But I would say before you even get on that horse, there's, as the parent and as the farm owner, there are certain things that should have been happening. There should be appropriate signage, there should be liability waivers, and there needs to be disclosures to that individual to let them know what the law in Florida is, because Florida is actually a little bit unique because there are equine liability statutes, and generally farm owners are going to be immune from liability for personal injury, for injuries that are going to arise out of events that directly attend to equine activities.
So let's break that down a little bit so people understand that.
Sure.
When you say they're immune from liability, what does that mean?
It basically means that if you sue them, you're not going to be successful.
Okay. You can't even get there, right?
You're not going to be able to get there. Now, there are exceptions, as there are, to any rule. For example, if there's faulty tack, if there's intentional acts, of course, if there's
I apologize. What's a faulty tack mean?
Oh, great question.
You're speaking the language, and I don't know the language.
Yes. So tack is what's referred to. It's basically the equipment that you put on the horse, the saddle, which is what the individual sits on, the girth, which is the piece of equipment that secures the saddle, the area that you sit in, onto the horse. Okay. The bridle. That's the piece that goes on the horse's the face.
I went to camp. I know a little bit about the language.
Exactly. So if I actually have a friend where this happened. She was at a camp and her daughter was riding and the saddle just started slipping and she fell off.
Okay.
That having a loose girth is something that can happen quite easily. That doesn't necessarily mean that the tack is faulty, but if it's an old girth
breaks,
and
it rips, it's torn.
These things are leather. Are they properly taken care of? I mean, is there only one buckle functioning? There's all sorts of things that could be.
But if it's inherent in the riding of the horse, the saddle's good, and just an accident that happens, otherwise you would sue. But in these circumstances, if they didn't do anything or know anything,
generally speaking, you're not going to be successful, and that's based on the Florida statute, because equine riding is considering an inherently dangerous activity. And that's why, though, there are these statutes which require the farm owners to put up signs.
What kind of signs? What does the signs have to say?
So there's liability warnings. You have to quote the statute, and you have to disclose there's the specific language, and actually it's set forth by the statute. They make those signs.
So this is going to be like, it's similar to dogs. I know you've got bad dog, caution, don't come on my property. Exactly. Similar
warning. This is an equine activity is inherently dangerous, and you have to have it posted at certain areas where you're going to be able to see it. So typically, I would recommend that farm owners post it at like their entrance, by the riding arena, where the area where you're in the barn tacking up. Because you want to make sure that it is visible. The statute does not require you to also have, it's an or statute, so you can have the signage posted or have someone sign a disclosure acknowledging that.
So let's talk about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. A waiver.
A waiver.
Yes. We have that in a lot of different cases where people go, and whether they're riding a roller coaster or playing football or riding a horse, there's a waiver that you sign. So I'm coming into you. I own a horse. I want to have kids, and people ride horses on my property. Gosh, Joanne, what do I do? What kind of waiver do I do? What language? And do you prepare those?
I do. And I would absolutely recommend that you have one. And I also will recommend that you use it because I can tell you that it is not uncommon for barn owners to go through the trouble of having an attorney draft a document and get all the legalese, get everything in there, and then have it sit in your desk because you want it to be fun. And it's, this is it's a family activity, and you don't want to bring in a liability form. But it's really important that you do. But no, so what types of things are in the form?
The waiver.
In the waiver, you're going to have a description of the activities. You're going to have the statutorily required language, which is going to disclose that there's no liability for injuries that are going to arise out of the equine activity, but you're also probably going to articulate in plain language. Because that's the other thing. I typically do not write my liability waivers in legalese. You need to have the certain statutory language, but you need to have it in a way that everyday people can understand, because you want to make sure that they understand the risks that they're about to engage in.
And not the 14 pages of where you can barely see it and read it and understand it.
Absolutely. You want them to understand what's going on, because I personally think that the liability waiver is a way to educate your client, educate your new novice rider. Generally speaking, folks that are going to be coming in, a lot of times they've never done this before. They don't know that a horse can spook. They don't know that a horse can kick. They might not think that a horse can bite. And so you use that as an opportunity to articulate to them, these are the things that could go wrong.
Right.
And these are the reasons why you need to listen to your instructor, and you have to abide by the rules that are set forth by this barn.
So are you a horseback rider?
I am a horseback rider.
Tell us about your horse experience. Where do you go? What do you do? You have your own horses?
I have my own horses. Yes.
Where?
So right now my horse lives in Homestead. I have a horse in Homestead, and then I have a retired horse in Ocala.
Nice.
So yeah, growing up, I used to ride in horse country, but as I'm sure those of you who are familiar with the area might know, horse country is changing
dramatically.
It used to be farms and
you're talking about Sunset and 120th.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now these, it's. I think it's sad. I think
it
depending
is.
on what side of the coin you're sitting on, you don't think
if you sold your property to developers, it's not so sad.
Exactly.
But if you used to take your kids out there and ride ponies on the weekends, it's sad.
Then it's sad. Exactly. Yeah. It is changing the makeup of horse country. Horse country is not so horsey anymore.
No.
But I grew up riding in horse country. I've competed since I was about 6 years old, a multinational champion.
What kind of competition?
So I ride Arabians and half Arabians in a saddle seat style. And so,
all right.
Yeah,
educate,
I know.
Break it down.
So
Arabians, non-Arabians, saddle. What does that mean?
Okay. So Arabian is a breed of horse.
Okay.
And they actually are native to Saudi Arabia, as you might imagine. They are, they're considered what's called a hot-blooded horse. So they're very spirited. They're small in stature. They have a lot of endurance. And they're one of the things that as the breed we're very proud of is they're incredibly versatile. So you can have an Arabian horse who does like Western pleasure, barrel racing, reining, or they can jump. They can do flat work, or they can do what I do is saddle seat. So that means their neck, they keep their head up and they trot their
We've seen that on
they
TV.
rise their they
Sure.
make their we call it waving their legs in the air. They trot very high and they have a lot of motion. They're very beautiful and elegant.
Okay.
So that's kind of the discipline that I am involved in. But I'm actually, and this is actually something that's been really fun for me as an equine lawyer. I grew up in this one world of Arabians and half Arabians doing what I do. And now I have clients that they're hunter jumpers, they're dressage. I represent an Andalusian farm, and I'm learning so much about the equine industry that I didn't even know about.
That's always the beauty of our practice.
I learn every day.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. And it's funny. I talked about being able to talk the talk, and I can, but I'm still learning. That doesn't mean I know everything.
Right.
I actually had a case with an Andalusian Andalusian farm recently, and learning all about how their breed is standardized and how Spain, there's regulations in Spain to control the stallions and their quality, and it was wonderful, and I learned all about this. And
we were talking about a mutual friend of ours, Zach Franklin, who is the horse doctor.
The horse doctor.
And if you have a case where I don't want to say medical malpractice, but a horse that's not treated correctly,
absolutely.
Is there liability and problems with that?
That absolutely can. I mean, just like you would have medical malpractice,
right?
You could certainly have something like that come up. Similar insurance.
So I know for a fact that we've got cases where people call us all the time, veterinarian malpractice. The dog is killed because the vet does something wrong, or there's an issue with regards to that. But our understanding is you don't get pain and suffering for that. A dog, unless it's a pure breed that's going to be bred and you're going to make a lot of money. I imagine sometimes these horses are extremely valuable. And if you have a beautiful Arabian horse that is maimed or hurt as a result of medical malpractice, it could be a substantial case.
It could. People ask, how much does a horse cost? And I say, well, how much does a car cost? You can buy an old clunker.
Careful now. What?
I know, exactly. You can get a free one,
Right.
or you can pay, have something
Top dollar
custom,
Rolls
top
Royce.
dollar, exactly. So there are absolutely, not even just in the Arabian world, but look at some of these racehorses, these
Sure.
thoroughbreds. I mean, they are incredibly valuable. So you absolutely can see some of these liability cases that go into hundreds of thousands, if not
sure.
more. Absolutely.
Especially if it's a horse that's meant to be
exactly.
or breeded, if that's the correct word.
Bred,
excuse me. And that could pump out, how many horses and multiply over years. And so it's a substantial claim.
Absolutely. Especially if you're talking about stallions, of course, because usually mares also can, mares are the ones who would supply the eggs, if you will. But stallions typically, that's where I would say more money is. You can certainly breed mares and be very successfully breeding a mare, but stallions, it's a little, but physiologically, it's a little bit easier without getting into it.
You had the opportunity to be involved with the big races and to go and see and do and be part of those?
So I have not done a lot in the thoroughbred world. I did actually have occasion to go to the Royal Ascot in England, and that was really fantastic. I've attended some races in the United States as well, but I had occasion to go to Ascot, which I went to, and that was really
what's that all about?
It's like their Kentucky Derby.
Okay, but their version of it.
Their version, exactly.
Okay.
It's a big spectacle, just like it is at the Derby, with everyone drinking and whatever juleps, if you will,
mint juleps,
and with the big hats, and the horses are really, they come from all over the world, and the purses are large. And
so we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's have two areas I want to touch on. One is working with family, because I do as well, but I want to go into first what other type of law you do. Insurance defense and you do commercial litigation. Tell us a little bit about that practice.
Okay, so our commercial litigation practice is a bit of a general practice. So we represent companies, big and small, in any manner of litigation that they might have, whether it be breach of contract, unfair and deceptive trade practices. We see that again.
So let's break that one down, because we've mentioned that a few times. UDIPTA, or there's an acronym for that.
There is UDIPTA, actually.
Unfair and deceptive trade practices. What does that mean?
It means basically that a company or an individual was using deceptive means in order to, if you're talking about the equine context, induce you into
buying a horse, selling a horse.
If you're talking about a car, they are using unfair and deceptive trade practices to complete that sale. If you're talking about, anything else, it basically has to do with intentional misrepresentation.
This car will go 100 miles an hour in 4 seconds flat.
Or, concealing things, right? Rolling back your odometer, things of that nature.
Okay.
That's just in a car context, but it can really mean
the house. It does. You don't tell them that there's plumbing problems. And okay. So what is it's got some bite. It's got some extra teeth in it. So
it does.
What's that all about?
One of the biggest, one of the things that makes the statute the strongest, teeth wise, is attorney's fees. You can get attorney's fees. And so that's something that, obviously is going to be attractive to plaintiffs' attorneys. And also it's going to be, if you're,
the penalty
against you if you're the defendant, that's going to get your attention. Right. There's also statutory fees. There's the opportunity for treble damages and punitive damages.
What's treble damages?
3 times damages.
Okay. So that's not something that happens often.
It's not. And it's not, it doesn't happen often. But it's certainly something that will get a company's attention.
Sure.
Because that's, you don't want to get slapped with those types of penalties, certainly.
And so, again, you work on plaintiff side, you work on defense side?
I typically, in the commercial litigation side, we do represent both sides, but we do tend to do more defense work.
Okay.
If there's a corporation that has an issue, sometimes they're going to have to be the plaintiff also. But we typically find ourselves on the defense side of commercial litigation.
So let's hit this subject, COVID.
COVID.
How has COVID affected your practice? We've been talking about that with everybody.
Absolutely. So, now that we're kind of up and running again, if you will.
We hope so, yeah.
What I've seen, I think I've seen kind of 2 trends, and I think they both dovetail nicely into the bucket of cost saving. I'm finding that companies were hit really hard by COVID and they're still in recovery mode. So I've seen kind of two different trends, I would say. One is early mediation. And I think that also has been made so much easier and facilitated by the acceptance of Zoom.
Right.
Now you can have corporate representatives in another state. They don't have to fly in person. You can have insurance adjusters in another state. You can have everyone Zoom in, which does make mediation just so much more cost effective.
And so for our audience out there, mediation is an attempt either before litigation or during litigation to try to resolve the case. The parties all get together and talk. And in essence, try to move the case along to settlement or conclusion.
Exactly. And I've found more of my clients exploring and asking about early mediation since COVID than I did before.
Yeah.
And I think that it's great, right? I mean, I actually, my father and I are both certified mediators. And
Okay.
So, I think that's something that has helped us where even though we're aggressive litigators, we're always trying to keep an open mind and find those paths to resolution, right? Because at the end of the day, protracted litigation a lot of times is not in the best interest of your client.
Best interest for lawyers, but not for
exactly,
the clients. Always, for sure. So you mentioned your father. I work with my brother. Yes. It's got its pros, it's got its cons. In essence, you trust the person, so it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
Father's a little bit different in the sense that he can train you, teach you, educate you. But on the other hand, you're the young pup and you know things that he doesn't know and you want to do things a different way. How is it working with your dad?
It is a pleasure. It is sometimes trying. We actually we get on very, very well, and I think that our strengths play. We both, as you mentioned, we both have our own strengths.
Right.
He has been doing this for over 50 years. He has seen it all.
Right.
I mean, it is. I have never gone in and said, "Oh, I have this issue that he's. Oh, I've never seen that before."
Unless it's a new computer issue and how to work social media.
And let me tell you, that's when I hear my name called down the hall.
Exactly.
But working with him, it's been such a pleasure because he grew up and started practicing when everyone went to trial, and it was just a different practice.
Back to the handshake.
Yes.
Back then, you talked to people, you trusted them, and it was a handshake. We settled. Now it's a different world.
It's a different world. It really is.
Unfortunately, I agree.
But no, I've learned so much from him, and I really do enjoy. I enjoy getting to see him as a practitioner. And that's been really one of the joyous things about the practice is I obviously know him as my dad, but now I get to know him as Phil the attorney.
Right.
And I hear other practitioners who've had experience with him, and they say, "Oh gosh, Phil, they talk so."
It helps that he's a nice guy. If he wasn't, to be a little bit different.
Almost all of them say good.
Right. Can't please everybody.
But it's so nice to hear that feedback from them, and also just I can see, all right, he's doing something right here. People that he's been on the same side with and litigated against, everyone has that same those same comments to say, and they say, he's one of the few attorneys where you can work with and you can work against.
Right.
And that's something that I'm trying to take to heart, and also
good lesson, good role model.
It really is.
It's important.
And that's something I'm also trying to instill in my students. I'm a professor
at FIU. Tell us about that. I understand that. Yeah.
I recently started. I'm teaching adjunct, and I'm teaching in the legal skills and values department, which it's legal writing and professionalism. And I'm really trying to instill that in my students that your reputation and your legal connections, it starts right here. It starts in the classroom.
Right. And
you're going to care. And people remember the way they're treated, and people remember your character, and they will remember that for the next 20 years. And you are the future of this legal community.
The future lawyers, the future judges, the future opposing counsels, the future people that are going to decide whether you get attorney fees and costs. Yes. And they're going to remember in law school if you were not such a nice person.
Exactly. And I mean, which isn't to say that you can't be a zealous advocate for your client, but there are certain there's still professional standards.
Ethics and honesty is so looked over, unfortunately. If we got good people like you teaching it, it helps.
Absolutely. No, I that was one of the reasons why I was really drawn to this particular department is that I've been practicing in the Miami community. I practiced in other states, in Chicago and Los Angeles. And sometimes I do see a lack of professionalism in South Florida that I might not see other places. And I really think it's important to get that ingrained in the students early on. because they are
at least
they're
expose
the future.
them to the good side
Absolutely.
of the fence.
And I love to go in and tell them my war stories, and this is how you could do it.
But with your mediation experience, also you're able to give them, because mediators see plaintiff and defendants, they see both sides, and they try to reach that happy median. So you have that ability to show them that's where we want to go.
And I think it's so important for you to be able to step into the other side's shoes, because you can get so locked into your own service, because you're not going to be able to see what's coming the other, what's about to come at you. But in terms of really being able to see how an outsider is going to see this case, you're going to be, if this goes to trial, how is a jury going to see this? How is the judge going to rule?
There's two sides to every story.
There's two sides to every story.
Yeah, and it can be presented by different ways, and each side's going to have the lawyer, and they're going to present it. And I know my first 5 years I did insurance defense, and it helps me every single day, because I know, all right, the insurance lawyer is reporting to the adjuster's meeting with his supervisors. They're evaluating it this way. They look at the cost. They look at the setup in Miami-Dade County versus Broward County versus the Keys. And it's really critical and important. But I really applaud you on the ethical side, because we need more people like you that are teaching the young people the ethics and how to be fair and be strong and be tough, but still be fair. And honest. And honest. Well, that's always a good thing. All right, so we're wrapping up now, but tell me, how do we get a hold of you? I have a horse problem. I have a litigation problem. I have an ethical problem. How do I get a hold of you and your father, and where are you? And
absolutely. Well, you can reach us on our website, which is www.sheeheandassociates.com.
Spell it out.
www.sheehandassociates.com.
Excellent.
And it's my email is the same. It's jsheehe@sheeheandassociates.com.
Great.
Or if you just want to pick up the phone and call, which I know a lot of people don't like to do these days, but we love to talk.
We love to.
It's our telephone number is 305-379-3515.
I want to thank you very much for being here with us today. We learned about horses. We learned about litigation, mediation, working with family, all the important things. I want to wish you and your father and your families happy and healthy holidays.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for today.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at our next show.